Zimbabwean music includes folk and pop styles. Much of the folk music incorporates Mbira instruments which are also popular in many other African countries, Mbira, Ngoma drums and hosho. An annual Zimbabwe Music Festival is held each year in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. People from all over the world attend this festival and share the experience of Zimbabwean music and culture. Popular genres in Zimbabwe include indigenous Mbira music, Chimurenga music, Sungura music, Sungumba music, Zimbabwean hip-hop, Zimbabwean reggae, Shangara, Jerusarema, gospel music, Mhande, Mbaqanga, Afro-Jazz and Rhumba. Mbira, the Mbira, often called a thumb piano, is an integral part of Zimbabwean music. It is played while in a halved calabash which amplifies the sound and distorts it using shells or bottle caps placed around the edges. Though musicologist Hugh Tracy believed the Mbira to be nearing extinction in the 1930s, the instrument has been revived since the 60s and 70s, and has gained an international following through the world music scene. Some renowned Mbira players include Dumazani Marana, Ifat Miajaru, Ford Quinder, Stella Shiwash, Chartwell Dutiro, Beulah Dioko, Cosmas Magaya, Muzekiwa Chingodza, Hakuratwi Mude, Shiwo Nizo Marana, Tude Shigamba, Wilfred Ma Africa, Albert Chimza, Hope Ruvimbo Masaik, Hector Rufaramugani, Tendai Gayamads, Prince Kudakwash Muzaruwa. Mbira Zinjari is a Mbira music genre popular along the eastern border of Zimbabwe. The Mbira instrument has 32 keys, far more complicated than other types of Mbira instruments. Not a lot is known about this type of Mbira. Foreign students from University of Washington recorded some of the music during the Zimbabwe Liberation War in Zimbabwe communal lands from prominent musicians in the area like Mumbo Chwanza and Nika Muzebiana Zimbabwe. The latter recorded one known single at Brahma Records, titled, Adzimigere Mwindichhema. Other leading Mbira groups include Mbira Zinharira, Mhande Nharira and Mbira Zicharadziva. It is also important to state that it is almost impossible to talk about Mbira music without making reference to Thomas Mapfumo, whose music comprises a fusion of Mbira and modern instruments. There is also pop music in Zimbabwe that incorporates their indigenous instruments. Although the Mbira is traditionally played as ceremonial music to call spirits, there are many who play it in world fusion music and get successful radio play and album sales in Zimbabwe and other countries in Africa. For example, Mbira player Chris Berry with his band Panjay have reached platinum record sales in Zimbabwe and Mozambique, playing a style of music based on traditional Mbira rhythms and melodies, but incorporating various other instruments and styles. Sungura, this is the local genre of the Zimbabwe music industry. Sungura music became popular in the early 1980s, pioneered by frontman Ephraim Joe and his band Sungura Boys, which counted many notable future hitmakers as members. Their role included John Chibdara, Simon Chimta, Nazon Chimtu, Ronnie Shitayaka, Michael Jambo, Ephraim Joe, Moses Marasha, Neva Moyo, Bartus Inferio, System Tazvada. The Kiama Boys emerged as natural successors to the Sungura Boys after their demise during the mid-80s. Members would include System Tazvada, Nicholas Zachariah, Alec Bakaso, Silas Charkanuka and Zachariah Zachariah. A great number of these artists have gone on to forge successful careers with their own bands, whilst Nicholas Zachariah has remained as the leader of the band and is still active as of 2008. James Chimum, whose romantic ballads and the influential Sungura guitar melody, made him a favorite in the late 80s. The 90s was dominated by musicians include Leonard Dembo, the effervescent Kiama Boys, veteran Simon Chimtu and upcoming artists Alec Bakaso, Tongai Moyo and Somad Lundbell. The star of the decade was none other than Leonard Socata, whose musical project was a spin-off of the double play Mornwe Brothers, an act fronted by Socata and his cousin Thomas Makian. The decade 2000 till present has been characterized by a wrangle for the crown for the kingship of Sungura between the two great superstars of the decade, Alec Bakaso and Tongai Moyo. Having dominated sales, tour and concert attendances, the heckling and counter-heckling by the artists at shows and in some recorded material is strong proof that the current feud is far from end. Other artists to come through this decade include Joseph Garakara, Gift Amulai and Dayton Samanji. And of late, Alec Makaso has risen to become one of the best singers in the music industry, with his popular dance O Rabata. System Tasvida, Simon Chimtu, John Chibdara, Leonard Dembo, and Thomas Makian have all died and left us with their sweet melodies. Afro-Jazz. Afro-Jazz is a term used for Zimbabwean music influenced by a style of township rhythm that evolved in the southern part of Africa over the last century. One can also trace similarities from Kwala, a penai whistle-based, street music from the southern part of Africa with jazzy underpinnings and a distinctive, skiffle-like beat. It is also closely related to Marabi, which was the name given to a keyboard style that had a musical link to American jazz, ragtime and blues, with roots deep in the African tradition. Early Marabi musicians were part of an underground musical culture and were typically not recorded. An example of such an artist in the early 1940s is Auguste Musarowa of the Skokian fame. It has continued to develop, and you can even see traits of this music in his grandson Prince Kudakosh Musarowa. Taiku music. Oliver Taiku Mtukadzi is a prolific recorder who has also appeared in films like Jit. He plays in a plethora of styles, and is known for penetrating lyrics. For example, he wrote a second song about AIDS in Zimbabwe after Paul Matab's hit song Ye Koyo AIDS Iriko. Jit is a generic term for electric guitar-driven pop, and includes wildly popular groups like the New Black Eagles and the Four Brothers. Internationally, the Bundu Boys are by far the best-known Jit performers, and have worked with numerous American and British musicians. Notable recent bands to come up with the Jit sound are Erica, who fuse the traditional Jit with funk sounds. There is also Mokumba and Q Montana. Rumba, African rumba, or soukous, is mostly associated with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but its popularity has inspired Zimbabwe's own brand of rumba in musicians such as Simon Chimtu and Leonard Socata. Soukous has been an influence on other artists such as the AUNN family. Nowadays, Zimbabwean rumba is more popular than imported rumba. Gospel music became popular in Zimbabwe in the late 1980s with stars like Jordan Shitayaka, Freedom Sengweo, Mechanic Banyayuk, and Jonathan Wutayu Nash were the first stars of Zimbabwean gospel, and the genre has continued to grow in popularity. Brian Sabalo and Mechanic Banyayuk also became very popular in the early 90s. The early 90s saw the rising of new gospel stars in the mold of Ivy Combo, Moyo and Carol Mujikaro of the EGEA Gospel Train, whose debut album Mufudzi Wangu was released in 1993 and contains tracks such as Be Thou My Vision, Ndotariza Kumakamo, and Utai Zero among others. The two went on to pursue successful solo musical careers and released Ndadzimpi Nyasha and Ropara Jesu as their debut solo albums respectively. Gospel artists who emerged from the mid-90s include Lawrence Hazer, Brother Sam with his hits Makanaka Jesu, and Krichedza, Elias Muzokwa, Rita Shonawa, the gospel trumpeter The Rose of Sharon fame, and Shinjisai Suluma, who only became popular in the early 21st century with the hit song Myra Mangwanani, though she first recorded in the 90s. In the late 90s, Charles Sharamba, a rising artist, grew in popularity, and currently holds gospel sales records. His music became popular into the first decade of the 21st century, most likely due to his Sungura-based contemporary style. In the early 21st century, a lot of gospel artists also recorded, though a few really rose to stardom. These include Fungicides Vakavapano, Mashavaith, who has risen to become the most dominant female gospel musician in the current era, Stanley Gwanzura, Kudzane Yakudaya, and gospel a cappella outfits like Vabati Vard Jehovah and Shower Power. Bulawayo. The Ndebele-dominated region of the southwest of Zimbabwe, including the city Bulawayo, has been instrumental in the development of Zimbabwean music. Seminal 1950s guitarist George Sibanda had a following across Africa, and Dorothy Mashika was a major player on the South African jazz scene, for example. Among the most popular performers of the region within Zimbabwe, however, was 1980s Ndebele pop sensation Lovemore Majaivana. Ndebele musicians who were active are Black Umflosi, Insingazi Marjara Wadwa and Dlovu, Sandrandbel, Wazi Chibangu, Xman, Go Boys, Ashuzai, Beat Man Gev, Fuzum Khair, Africa Revenge and Ramad. The marginalization of Bulawayo artists in Zimbabwe saw the influence of South African music dominating, hence the emergence of Kwaito music in Bulawayo pioneered by Go Boys in 1996 and more groups like GTI, Ashuzai, Amagangsters, etc., emerged. A brand of jazz was created in Bulawayo, in the 1940s and 1950s, and was made popular by August Muzarilwa with his African dance band of the Cold Storage Commission of Southern Rhodesia. He recorded the legendary song Sikakayana, which went on to be recorded in USA by Louis Armstrong and many others. Lyrics: Zimbabwean musicians' lyrics mostly contain encouragement of upholding good social values in the family and society as whole. Such lyrics can be seen in songs by artists like Oliver Mtukudzi, Simon Chimtu, Nerika Louis Mlinga, John Chibdara, Steve McAnee, Bundu Boys and many others. Of note however is Thomas Mapfumo, whose lyrics are mainly political and encourage good leadership and rising against bad governance. Most of his albums are named after a word meaning uprising or war of liberation, Chimurenga. His music has earned him the wrath of the ZANU-PF government, resulting in the banning of most of his music on state-owned radio and TV. Another outstanding musician with striking lyrics is the late System Tasvada of the Chasers Challengers. His lyrics were mainly centered on the subject of love, and this gained him popularity with songs like Anaudia Wahato, Karamba Yushachima, Vanotype Zira Mashoko, and I Hands Vitziyarawa. With the coming of urban grooves, the lyrics content resembles that of American R&B, hip-hop and pop music which the younger generations listen to. One artist, Mazgiri, is known for imitating Eminem's style of controversial lyrics. Urban grooves. Coming on the music scene in the late 1990s and early 2000s, urban grooves takes in American rap, hip-hop, R&B, soul and other international music genres, often melded with traditional Zimbabwean music. Artists such as Sunny Morkalima, Roy and Royce, David Chifunais, Leonard Mapfumo, Roki, Stack, Betty McKaya, Extra Large, Mazgiri, Cactus and Nerika laid the groundwork for the new genre, which gained increasing popularity among the youth. The style was helped by the 100% local content policy in effect at the time, which required all radio stations to play only music by Zimbabwean artists. A second generation of artists such as Alexio Kawara, Drum Dada, Q Montana, Mokumba and Nerika have come to prominence more recently. See also, Paul Berliner, International Library of African Music, Mbira, Shona Music, Hugh Tracy, Zimbabwean Marimba, Zimdancehall Music. References: Kendall, Judy and Banning Air. Jit, Mbira and Chimurenga, Play It Loud. 2000. In Broughton, Simon and Ellingham, Mark with Maconachi, James and Dwayne, Ola, World Music, Volume 1, Africa, Europe and the Middle East, pages 706–716. Rough Guides Limited, Penguin Books. ISBN 1-85828-636-0. External links: BBC Radio 3 Audio, Zimbabwe 1988. Access November 25, 2010. Dandemutanda, a non-profit resource for Zimbabwean music and culture, Mbira.org. Erica Azim site, based in Berkeley, CA. Zombuko Solomon Marungu's Shona Music Site, Zimbabwean Music Festival, an annual performance and workshop festival in North America, Africa Beats, Zimbabwe's Mokumba, Tonga Music, Zimbabwe's music station.